Hello. Looks like we are good to go. We are live. Thanks, everybody. People keep popping into the room as we go, and that's fine. We're actually going to be recording this tonight, so I'll tell you where you can find that all in a minute if you do happen to miss part of tonight or want to watch it again later. First, just a couple of announcements. I'm Carla Bruni with the Chicago Bungalow Association. Just want to tell you about a couple of things we're doing in general before I launch in and tell you all about Jackie. We are going to, our Treehouse Awards are coming up in the next few weeks where we're going to open up our submissions at that time. So keep your eyes open for that. It's most of you may have already heard of it. It's an incredibly popular competition. Every year they're just getting better and better and more amazing. You guys are submitting some really, really thoughtful and incredible things. And so just keep your eyes out for that. We'll be sending emails out about it. Also, you can always check our website for updates. And we are, as I mentioned, recording this tonight, but and you'll be able to watch it on Facebook after this on our Facebook page. You can also now watch it through our YouTube channel, however. So if you go to our website, you can click on our seminars page and there'll be a link right at the top that'll take you to our YouTube. So that's it for just our general announcements. Other than that, tonight, just so you know how things are going to run, we are going to have our chat disabled. So don't try and put anything in the chat box. The Q&A is where you're going to want to put your questions and answers for Jackie tonight. And we're going to go through those as we go. If there's some stuff, we can answer along the way behind the scenes, we'll do that for you. But most of it, we're just going to do all of the Q&A at the end. We'll have a good 15 minutes or so to go through those questions. You guys will be muted the whole time, but we'll be asked, I'll be facilitating with those questions and Jackie will be answering them for you. If we don't have a chance to get to those questions, to get to your question tonight, we're also going to, Jackie was kind enough to offer to respond to those questions, and we'll send you out an email afterwards with the presentation from tonight, a recording from tonight, and also those additional questions or answers to those questions. So keep an eye out for that email as well. We are going to be ending promptly at 7 p.m. tonight. So Jackie's going to present for about 40 minutes or so, and the rest of the time we're going to have for Q&A with you guys. And I think that's it for all the business. But I wanted to introduce Jackie Riffice and her Great Gardens from Harvest to Holiday presentation now. Jackie, we've known for pretty much ever. She's been working with us on like so many things, all the library days where we were dragging out through all kinds of weather. Jackie was there doing these incredible gardening presentations for us. She's, moved around a bit since then, spent a few years in California and came back. So we nabbed her immediately to try and get her to do this with us. And she was really kind enough to do it. Jackie was born and raised in the south suburbs of Chicago. She grew up in Dolton and settled in Flossmoor with her husband, Larry, and raised 2 kids to adulthood who are good citizens of the planet. She found out quite by accident that gardening was relaxing and that digging in the dirt was her happy place. Along the way, she founded Prairie Godmothers, a service-based, hands-on company that created sustainable home landscapes and touted the benefits of greener living by demonstrating how to save the planet in easy-peasy ways. Jackie put Prairie Godmothers to bed a few years ago, but continues to help out when a call comes in. Jackie's a master gardener, a volunteer in the Lurie Garden in Chicago. She serves on a church board in the Flossmoor Community Relations Commission and has been involved in the community for over 35 years there. She has a long history with the Chicago Bungalow Association, and she is happy for the opportunity to work with their members. And she has worked with many of you. So without further ado, I will let Jackie take over. Thanks, Jackie. Oh, you're on mute.
Thanks, Carla. Let me figure out how to, let's see what we have here. I appreciate the opportunity to work with the Bungalow Association again. And so let's get started. Carla told you a little bit about me, and I'd like to introduce you to Great Gardens from Harvest to Holiday. And so most Chicago bungalows are seated on a footprint that measures about 25 wide by maybe 125 deep. Some are a little bit bigger. But the garden spaces, while they might be a little bit small, are very powerful And today I'm going to show you how to get them in ship shape for every season. So travel along with me while we talk about how to retire the garden, how to plan and plant for next season, and bring color to the garden. And I hope you learned something from this that you didn't know before you started tonight. When it comes time to put the garden to bed, I can give you ways to do it in a few easy steps, and it will just take a weekend. And with weather like we're having today, it might feel like you need to start cleaning up the garden now, but you know this is Chicago, so we can have 80-degree weather at the end of the month. But you'll be able to do, whenever you decide to do it, you'll be able to do it in a weekend. One of the things you start to do in a garden as you get ready for fall is to define your garden spaces. And when I say that, I mean, make a very clear delineation between your garden spaces and your turf, which is your grass. An edge can be done with a few quick moves with your shovel to create that space between your plantings and your grass. You can also use very interesting delineators like colorful plates, old pieces of wood, and decorative stone. And at my house, I have a border around one of my back gardens with about 200 wine bottles. I'm not a wine drinker, but I was able to find them at a garage sale and had a really perfect border put in place. The thing about defining your garden spaces is this is the perfect time to year to do it, and even more perfect with a day like today after we have rain. And so one of the things that I'll send along to the Bungalow Association that Carla will be able to share with you is a short YouTube video on how to cut great edges and just a few easy steps. It's also time to declutter your garden spaces. And this again is the time of year where you can start to deadhead or cut back some of those leggy, unsightly plants. Now, a couple things about that. In my garden, I like to leave a lot of the plants standing through the winter to the spring. I like the look of a garden that is filled with seed heads because they are haven and hideaway to migrating birds. But if you want to cut any of your other plants down, you can cut the tops off that are the spent blooms, and you can even cut them back to about 5 or 6 inches in height. If your shrub needs pruning, and if it bloomed in the summer, this is the perfect time to cut it back. Generally speaking, you can trim your shrubs back by a third, by either cutting a third of the top off or a third of the stems out of the shrub itself. But you want to make sure it's a shrub that just bloomed in the summer. If you cut back shrubs that bloomed in the spring, you'll be cutting off the blooms that have already been set for next season. So know your plant, know your shrub, and take it from there. Also a good time to share the bounty of your garden by splitting some of your plants and moving them all the way around the garden. So splitting and transplanting this time of year is great for hostas like you see in the photo, but also irises, daylilies, lilies of the valley, bleeding hearts. A number of different things can be split and moved about. And as I name these plants, it's important to know the kind of plant that you're dealing with. So I will share with you a couple books that I use as my garden Bibles, but you can also take pictures and send them on to various apps that can help you identify them as well. And then finally, don't forget about weeding. These guys, we want to get these guys out of here before the frost hits. Weeds are perennial, which means they can come back every year, just like the good plants. So this is the time of year when you want to make sure you get those guys out by their roots. And while the timing for decluttering is pretty wide open, you just want to make sure that come late October or early November, before the freeze hits, that you get all of this taken care of. along with defining your garden and decluttering, you want to protect both your garden and your tools. So again, perfect time of year to add a top coat of mulch or compost to your garden spaces. This is a great time of year to put 3 inches of mulch on your garden spaces. Mulch, as you probably know, will protect your the roots of your plants and shrubs. It will also act as a weed preventative. It won't keep the weeds away, but it'll make those weeds fight hard to find sunlight. And so it's a good way to keep the garden looking really great. I would offer a godmother tip about picking out mulch this time of year, and that is to select hardwood mulch that is natural in color. We don't like to use cypress mulch, which unfortunately is probably the most affordable mulch you can find. But cypress mulch is irresponsibly harvested from Gulf areas. And so we like to stay with the hardwood, and we like to stay with natural colors so the colors don't leach into the soil. I would recommend cleaning and sharpening your tools and containers. Sharpening tools can be a little tricky, but there's nothing that can keep you away from actually cleaning off soil and crusted dirt on all your tools. You can get that all cleaned off with a damp cloth. You can remove rust spots with fine-grained steel wool. You can sharpen some edges of your small trowels and things like that. And then you rub the entire tool, including the wooden handle, with a very thin coat of mineral or motor oil. It'll be nice to keep it protected like that over the cold winter. And if none of this works for you, the lazy man's way to get your tools ready for next season is to clean them off and store the metal parts of the tools in a big bucket full of sand. Pour a quart of clean motor oil into that sand and toss it around. And then put your tools in there and let it soak in and let them stay there over the course of the winter. And when it's time to clean your planters, just scrub them out. I like to redistribute the soil from the planters back into my garden. I don't reuse it year after year after year. I empty them out, I clean them out, and I stack them, often separating the containers with a piece of newspaper in between. I have room in my garage, but if you don't, you can put them up close to the house, up close to the brick, where the sun beating on the brick will keep your containers extra warm. Let's talk about planting this season and planning for the next season. Everybody needs a good book and a good friend when you're raising children and planting a garden. And so I will tell you about a couple books that I like that really are the Bibles that I use. The book that's here is called Tree and Shrub Gardening for Illinois, and it's written by a guy named Bill Aldrich, who has been a renowned author, at least in the state of Illinois. Bill had published books on trees and shrubs, perennials, and garden plants, flowers for your garden. And what I love about these books is that they will tell me very specific varieties of plants that I can plant in this area of Illinois, what kind of sun and shade they need, and it's very helpful. So everybody needs to have a book that they can follow. This is mine. And I think it helps when you're planting and planning that you have a good friend as well that knows a little bit about gardens. And as you know, you can ask 4 gardeners the same question, and they're going to tell you 4 different answers, and they're all going to be correct. So you're going to want to find a friend that gives you good advice and stick with that friend. When we talk about buying plants now for next season, this is a good time to buy because cool weather is a great time to plant shrubs and trees. You don't need to water them as frequently as you do in the dog days of summer. So that's the good part. The bad part is that sometimes the selection is limited, but the prices are great. So when you're getting ready to shop, if you want to plant ahead for next fall, make sure that you understand what you're going to shop for in terms of what fits around your house. And I'll give you some hints on that as we move through this deck. But I can tell you, if you're looking for shrubs for around your house, for a bungalow size, you're going to want to look for things that have a spread of no more than 8 feet tall or 8 feet wide. Someone had asked a question about summer shrubs. We're going to get there. And then there was another question about black forest mulch. And again, any mulch that's dyed, and I believe black forest is something that I stay away from. But if that's what makes you happy in your garden, by all means, use that. Bungalows can look awful tired now and again, because if you stand in your front yard and look down the block, you might see all the same sorts of hedges on every single house down the block. It's starting to change with thanks to the Bungalow Association, because they like to promote beautiful landscapes. It's a good idea, however, to have something green in front of your house or behind your house all year round. And that's because in the dead of winter, when everything loses its leaves, you want to have some sort of interest staying green in front of the house. So I give you some suggestions here: a yew, a bearberry, small or dwarf arborvitae or varieties of evergreens, but there's a few others here. Holly, boxwood, rhododendron are just a few. Now, they grow into various sizes, but they fit well around a bungalow landscape, and they do stay green. They don't drop their leaves. So you have a little interest, even if there's nothing else in the front of your house when you have an evergreen. There are some really great shrubs that will fit the profile of these historic bungalow landscapes. I'm going to share some with you, and I believe I sent a handout to the Bungalow Association for distribution to all of you, so you'll get that as well. There's 3 that are pictured here that I think you'll enjoy in your landscape. The button bush, again, they all grow around 8 feet tall, 8 feet wide, but can be controlled with clippers. A button bush is a really great a shrub that likes wet feet. And that means if you have a wet part of your home, this is the place to put a button bush. And it gets a beautiful flower on it that looks like Sputnik. I'm probably aging myself when I say Sputnik, but it looks like a Russian space capsule when it blooms. A button bush is a really great plant that just accentuates the historic beauty of your home. In the viburnum series, there are over 150 species of viburnums. There are shrubs that fit every type of landscape. And the reason they work so well with bungalows is because they get beautiful blooms. You can pick them with white blooms, yellow, pink, blue, and they can grow into various heights and widths. So don't forget about the very versatile viburnum. And then another really interesting one to select is the black chokeberry. It's a beautiful black berry on it, like you see here. They don't call it a chokeberry for nothing. It's the very last berry that a bird will go after in the fall, because take it from me, it has a terrible taste, but really good in a garden. I also mentioned a 9-bark. This guy has an irregular habit, which means it kind of goes all over the place, kind of an airy look. But some of those dark plum 9-barks look really great with your yellow and gold bricks. A shrubby cinquefoil is one of the most hardy garden shrubs you can find anywhere, and it gets a little yellow flower on it. You might want to consider those. And then there's a spice bush, and I always mention something in the native plant category, and a spice bush is one of those shrubs. It attracts swallowtail butterflies, and again, perfect for a bungalow. Let's talk a little bit about plants, and consider natives, perennials, and pollinators. So a native is a plant that's like me. It's indigenous to the area. It might not be the showiest plant in the garden, but it survives the seasons well, and it's a real strong grower. And so the beauty of a native plant is that it attracts native bees, birds, and butterflies, and helps bring our gardens, the balance of our nature and gardens, it brings it back for us. Perennials are plants that come back every year, and I'm a big perennial planter as well. And I like pollinators. I like to attract wildlife to my yard, and I don't mean wildlife that comes from alleys. I mean wildlife like birds, bees, and butterflies. So I've given you a selection here of things that work really well in your garden. These are beautiful flowers and grasses that bloom at various points during the summer and spring, early spring, summer, and early fall. And I'm also going to suggest that you might want to consider bulbs for your landscape, and that this is the time of year to plant them. Lots of bungalows plant tulips. I'm going to suggest that you plant daffodils. The beauty of a daffodil is that you can buy them so that they bloom early, mid, and late season. So you can have beautiful color, whites, yellows, and golds from very early March all the way through almost the beginning of June. So these are selections that I've picked out that really work well with bungalows. So we've talked about getting that garden ready for the fall by cleaning it up. We've talked about how to plant and what to plant to get it ready for the following season. But what do we do about these darn cold months when things look pretty grim in our landscapes? I'm going to share with you this picture here. Gilbert and Mitzi Cantu were winners this season of a bungalow award for their potted landscape in front of their house. They are such creative gardeners and incredibly joyous with how they decorate their home. And they gave me a picture of how they decorate for the holidays, actually. And so they decorate almost exclusively with pots that have trees and small trees and shrubs in them, and of course lots of colorful flowers. And come wintertime, they go all out with lights and color. So this is one example of using seasonal greens to decorate during the cold months. The other thing that works really great when you decorate in the cold months is that you don't have to really decorate your whole yard front or back. You can use single displays that just catch your eye, and I'll give you some examples of those. One of the benefits of bringing color around your house in the cold months is that you can use items that you find along the way when you're going for a walk, and you can pick them up and use them. When I say that, I mean branches that you might find when you're walking, acorns, things like that. And when you use them in your garden, you can delight for the season, and then when they're old and start to decompose, you can put them in your compost bin. And then finally, using natural organic things provide food and shelter for winter birds. I'm getting a couple different questions. Do you want me to answer them now, Carla, or wait on it?
Usually we just take them at the end,
okay.
But it's, you know, it's up to you.
I'll do that. I'll just wait till the end.
Okay.
Do that. Let's see, what did I do here? Oh. So here are some planters that you'll find that in front of windows, but I know you bungalow owners have an excellent platform for planters. So one of the keys to decorating planters is 3 words: thrill, fill, and spill. To plant an eye-catching planter, and you'll see in these examples, they're fall examples, and they're purchase products. They're pumpkins, branches, pine cones, kale, mums, things like that. But when you put them together, we want to do thrill, fill, and spill. We want things that are tall, that will catch your eye. We want fillers that will fill those spaces around the taller plants. And we want spillers. We want things that kind of hang over. And if you look at each of these separate pictures, you'll find all 3 elements. And at the end of the season, you take those pumpkins and kale and you throw them into the compost bin. I have to say now, though, as you're looking at these things, it's easy for some gardeners and some homeowners to be a little intimidated, perhaps, by some of the beautiful things they see at other houses. And this Prairie Godmother is going to tell you that just do what makes your heart sing. If it makes you happy, that's what really matters. So you don't want to ever compare yourself to HGTV or the Master Gardener down the block. You just want to do what looks great to you. And that's where we go when we start to decorate for the season. We want just stuff that's going to make us happy and get us through this cold winter. I'm going to shoot you some DIY ideas. The key for me when I garden now is I want to spend as little as I can, but stun as much as I can. And so I have taken to looking in my dad's basement for lots of things that I can use to decorate around my house, not just in the winter season, but all year round. So here are 2 examples of things that will catch somebody's eye over the cold winter without having to decorate the whole front of the house. If you take ice skates and fill them with greenery, it's just such an eye-catching thing. And those ice skates can actually stay up all year because you can change the foliage inside as the seasons go. You can put beautiful hosta leaves in there in the summertime. You can take branches and put them in there, spray paint them or not. It's just a good vessel to use all year round. The picture on the right that has fireplace wood in it and a few pieces of branches and some pine cones. I love this one because this lady just threw this stuff in a container. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful. There's a certain appeal to it, and she didn't have to do a whole lot of work to get it. While we're talking about greenery, one of the things that I do around the holidays is I hang around, the local church sells Christmas trees, and I hang around there every night because when they cut off the branches, the lower parts of the trees, to get them ready for their customers, they throw all those extra boughs out. And I'm there to pick them up for free to use them to decorate my own house. Here are a couple more ideas. Again, when our houses are covered with snow or are just plain cold, we don't have the benefit of a really warm climate to keep this color here all year round. So we want to put together a couple little vignettes here and there. And these are just more examples. I use a sled on my front porch, and I have one there right now. It's not decorated in holiday colors, but it is decorated with summer colors. I have dried out coneflowers actually that I have wrapped in mine. and a couple little ornaments that I put there that pick up the colors of the season. And I'll change those out to match the colors of the harvest coming up. But again, I find these things and follow my mantra to not spend a lot of money, you know, spend little and stun a lot. And then finally, I can share these with you as well. These aren't mine, but I personally borrowed these ideas. If greenery is not your thing, or you want something really different in a flower box or in a container, why not consider colorful jars that you can put candles in, or you know, fake candles in as you want to decorate your house over this long winter season. A good collection of bottles works really great. And I don't do it in flower boxes, but I do it in big flower pots in front of my house and up my walkway. And then the picture on the right, of course, are just grapevine balls, easy to find, a couple pine cones, and then taking greenery that you find and putting it into a container. So the story here is that when we get our gardens all cleaned up for the end of the season, and we pick the kinds of things that we want to plant in the fall, then the next thing we need to do is consider how we want to bring some color to our house over the cold winter. And I hope you've gotten some ideas here. So I think, Carla, that I'll answer some questions now. So I just pop up the box here.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Start answering questions, and then I'll take whatever else I can.
Yeah.
Mark wants to know if this is a good time to plant sod. Yes, it is a good time to plant sod. Always a good time, as long as you prepare. I'm not the grass guy, but I do know how to do it. It makes sure that the soil is loosened and prepared for the sod. And the thing about that is, if you were planting sod in the middle of summer, you'd have to be concerned about the hot sun and making sure it's really watered all the time. With this case, the sod will work very well in weather like this. Marianne is, I hope I get all the questions. If I miss some, I'll just circle back and get back to you after this. Does the book recommended discuss pet-friendly or poisonous shrubs? The book will tell you what is not good for pets, and I don't believe it even recommends anything that's poisonous. So I think that the book is very, very informative. But on the topic of pet-friendly and poisonous, I should mention that when you are putting mulch on your soil, they do a cocoa bean hull mulch. You can purchase cocoa bean hulls. It smells delicious. It smells like chocolate because they're from cocoa beans. And I don't use that for two reasons. Number one, the mulch is too lightweight and you'll be replacing it next season. And number two, if ingested in large amounts, it's not good for dogs that come in the neighborhood because it is cocoa. So I don't use that. I have a question that says, why not go all native plantings? There's no reason not to go all native plantings. I would say 70% of the plants in my garden are native, but I like a nice mix of color in my butterfly garden, and so I bring in perennials for that reason. But there's no reason to not go all native. My shrubs are native, and like I said, 70% of my plants are. I do make a recommendation that the Bungalow Association will share with you, and that is, if you need to know anything about native shrubs and plants, We have our very own expert out in Monier, Illinois, which is a little bit south of me here in Flossmoor. Possibility Place is the place to learn and go if you have any questions about native plants. Shelby Beverly wants to know how long she should leave her potted mum plants on the front porch if she puts them out this month. You can leave them out as long as they continue to bloom, and before the ground gets cold, you can plant them. Make sure the soil, the soil is really good around them and they have a nice cover of mulch on them. Chances are you have a 50-50 chance that they'll live and rebloom next season. Generally plants that come out of hothouses like spring flowers, and of course mums have been forced to bloom in a nursery, and so they look beautiful on top and aren't necessarily strong underneath. So I would probably not put them in the ground until sometime after Halloween. Anna wants to know if I recommend any small trees and shrubs for outdoor pots in our region. Anna, I can tell you that the only shrub that in my experience, has been successful being in an outdoor pot is is a boxwood. Boxwoods come in small, medium, and large sizes, but they're a kind that can grow in a container pretty well and can be moved if your meters need to be accessed. I haven't much experience with anything bigger than that, but you really can't go wrong with a boxwood. Where do you like to order bulbs? I order bulbs from, they're not paying me to say this, I order bulbs from a company called Color Blends, colorblends.com. They are out in Connecticut. They work directly with bulb growers in the Netherlands. And what I love about Color Blends is that on their website and their catalog, they will tell you what part of the season your bulbs will bloom. And so when I mentioned that my daffodils bloom early, mid, and late season, I know this because I bought them from Color Blends, and they bloom as advertised. So that's the place that I use. I also always encourage those of us who shop locally to shop locally. Try to avoid the big boxes if possible, and go to your local nursery and invest in the community that way. Any advice on natural ways to remove lots of weeds? There's all sorts of methods out there that people might recommend, but as a master gardener, I have to stick to what is factual and what is safe in a garden. And so in my garden, I pull my weeds by hand, and I use a pre-emergent like preen to prevent weeds from continuing to grow. As a volunteer gardener at the Lurie Garden in Millennium Park, I know the horticulturist there uses, it's called plant vinegar. I think it's probably available online. I've never used it, but it's a way to, it's a solution that they use to get weeds out of cracks. Probably the best way is, to pull them by hand. I do have a lot of weeds in an area that has been plaguing me for years. So this season, about a month ago, I pulled out all the weeds I could. I took black plastic tarp that's not breathable, and I laid it down and covered it up with bricks. I'm hoping to I'm hoping to keep air and sun away from them and perhaps kill them by next season. So it's an experiment. Check with me next spring. Would I transplant a hydrangea at this time? I would transplant a hydrangea at this time. I would cut it back so that it's maybe just 10 inches tall. And I would make sure that I took a very large circumference and made sure I got well below the roots to be able to replant it someplace else. But this is a safe time to do it. Do I recommend in-ground soil for planting? I'm not sure what that question means. I can tell you that when I put my plants, when I plant in the ground, I always have with me a bag of garden soil and a compost from my own compost bin. And I mix a little cocktail of that together to ensure that along with the plant I'm putting in the hole, I'm putting in some really good soil as well. Mary would like a couple of prairie flowers in front of her house, but there's a sewer line under that area. Prairie plants can have long roots. Is that a problem for damaging sewer lines? Prairie plants, Mary, do have really long roots, and it's often the ones that are 6 feet tall that have really, really long tap roots. So there are always a handful of prairie plants that you can use that are a little bit smaller. For example, there's a coreopsis, which is a beautiful yellow flower. There's a perennial version and a prairie version. There's something called a cardinal flower that also is a prairie plant. It's a native plant. So I would stay away from cup plants and compass plants. Those are the things that look like really huge sunflowers. Otherwise, I think you would be fine. How do you divide daylilies and how do you divide coneflowers? Both daylilies and daylilies are really tough. There's not a whole lot you can do to hurt their feelings. And so when I divide daylilies, underneath there are something, they're called rhizomes. They're like underground, they look like little tiny potatoes. That's how they spread. And so I just dig a couple inches deeper than the plant and maybe take out a square of 8 inches by 8 inches and pull them up, and then you can pull them apart and replant them. There's really not a neat way to do it. It tends to be a little messy, but just putting your shovel in and pulling up a piece you like will be easy enough to move it around. And if you want to divide up coneflowers, that can be a little trickier. In fact, I don't divide my coneflowers, so I can't tell you with any certainty that splitting them up is really a great thing. What I do with my coneflowers is I'll take some of the tops off, I'll deadhead them, and then I just throw them in my garden space and let them overwinter. And that's how I have reseeded coneflowers in my own garden. Sanhita has a north-facing front yard that doesn't get much light. What flowering perennials would work, if any? Oh my gosh, there's any number of them. Consider something called a foam flower and a stilby. Hostas, they don't look like they bloom, but they do get a beautiful bloom on them. Coral bells, columbine, Brunera. Sanita, if you want to send me an email, because I'll put up my email address, I'd be glad to give you a whole list. Margaret is giving me information about the chokeberry. She's telling me they make wonderful jelly. And Margaret, I'm going to spend some time reading your response here. And thank you for teaching me something tonight. I really appreciate it. Ron has a Japanese barberry in his front yard, and he's read they're invasive and banned in some states. I can't tell you, Ron, if they're banned in this state or in any state. I'd have to do some research. But I know they are not recommended in many gardens, and I don't have any. The best process for removal, really, if you want to get them out, is it's just to dig them up, pull them, get them out by the root. If they're really, really big, you may need to cut them down to 10 inches or so and then work them out that way. I had some pulled out at a church that I'm gardening, and I cut them down to about 10 inches. And then I actually had to have a landscaper come in and pull them out. Joe and Mary Beth want to know if this is a good time to test soil, or is it better in warm weather, specifically for garden vegetable beds. I would say this is both spring and fall are good times to test soil. If you contact your local master gardener office, they can tell you agencies that you can use to do this. The key to testing your soil is getting the right amount, the right type of soil that you want to test. So you have to make sure you're digging down and taking a couple different selections from areas around the garden. Joe and Mary Beth are also telling us that their 3-year-old dogwoods exploded this year and are over 6 feet tall now. Will it damage the dogwoods if you cut them down 1/3? And I think that's good news that they exploded full of color, because that's always a good thing in a garden. It is a early summer bloom, so it's okay to cut them back now. And generally the thought is either cut them 1/3 off the top, or cut them 1/3, cut 1/3 of the stems away from it. So yep, this is a good time to do this, cut them before we get into the winter months. Ingrid wants to know if I have any advice for rose bushes. Ingrid, I am a very unsuccessful rose bush grower. Have never had much success. I do know that they take a lot of attention. There's just the right amount of soil and just the right amount of sun. But unfortunately, I can't offer you any specific advice on rose bushes. Claire's black-eyed Susans are turning black this year, and her neighbors are still going strong. Claire, without seeing them, I don't know that you actually did anything wrong. My black-eyed Susans have a problem every 3 years or so, and that's not uncommon in the black-eyed Susan world of plants. And I'm actually looking them up now while I'm talking to you, but I'd be glad to get back to you with a little more information. Just off the top of my head right now, I'd tell you that I don't think you've done anything wrong. I just think that you know, sometimes they can be a little bit difficult. I would advise deadheading them and then cutting them back though before the end of the season. Tracy wants to know if her caladiums will be okay if she brings them in over the winter. That's an indoor plant in this zone, so yep, they'll be fine if you bring them in. And Tracy, I'm not familiar with what a Kentucky lady slipper is, but again, I'll follow up with you, or if you send that information to me to my email, I'd be glad to do some research and answer it for you. And then Marianne has very invasive morning glories this year, and she's trying to get everything under control. Yep, they are beautiful, but they are incredibly invasive, and they will vine all over the place. My advice is to not just pull them out from above the surface, but go, dig down and see if you can't get them out. And this may be something, Marianne, you need to do for a couple of years, really, to get them under control. If it's really problematic to you, one of the things you might want to consider is what I did with my excess daylilies and weeds that I had, and that was to cut them all back, cover them with that heavy black landscaping tarp, and make sure we can try to smother them out and see what it looks like next season. Maddie is asking about trumpet vines. She moved into a bungalow with trumpet vines on the covered deck. Trumpet vines, Maddie, are incredibly beautiful and incredibly invasive. And that's a problem. They'll wrap around your covered deck, but they will continue to shoot out underneath your soil and pop up in your lawn in many places. So my thought is, if I had a trumpet vine and it was in an area that wouldn't affect anything near my home, I might want to leave it. Otherwise, I'd work really hard to try to tame it and perhaps even pull it up, because they will get very thick roots and might be problematic over time. There are a handful of other beautiful vines that you might want to consider. Anne has a smoke bush that has now showing signs of a wilt on it. Any recommendations for a replacement? Given the color of the smoke bush, I might recommend to you a 9-bark. I will assume you had a single stem with multiple limbs on it, but I know smoke bushes can have multiple limbs as well. I would think about a 9-bark in that burgundy color that they sell. They do grow them as natives and as regular cultivars, but that's always my go-to. I like that. So you might want to consider that. And Anne has an Asian jumping worm, and she's researching to find the status. I don't have any experience with them, and I don't have a way to get rid of them. But again, Anne, if you take a look at my email address, I bet my friends at the Prairie Garden would have a really good answer, because I know they were dealing with some invasives that were jumping around the garden there. And I'm going to do some research for you if the 9-bark is susceptible to the wilt. So yeah, email me and we'll see if we can't find some solutions for your tree. And Sunita has English ivy that's taken over a large segment of the ground in her backyard. If you want to get rid of it, sometimes it's a great ground cover. We don't want ivy to grow up on our bricks, however, because it really is invasive to the mortar. Suggestions on how to get rid of it: keep it cut back the best you can and dig it up, and they're going to fight you back, Sunita. They don't want to come out of the ground, but I would say if they're small patches, you can probably do it on your own. If they're big and gangly and ganging up on the house, you might want to bring in a landscaper to help you pull them out. And Anahita asked about any tips on growing a wisteria in tree form. I don't have any tips on growing it in tree form. I can do some research at my Master Gardener office to see if there are any things that might help, but I'm not able to help you with that one, and I apologize for that.
Okay, we are we have like 2 more minutes to go, so it's of course perfect timing. Also, you did my job as well. I was going to be the one reading all those questions, so thank you.
I'm sorry, Carla, I didn't know.
No, I know how you are. I know how you are. You're a teacher always. It's like he wants to. That's okay. Thank you so much.
Better next time, I promise.
It's fine. I just wanted to make sure. Oh yeah, there's your email. Okay, so everybody can see that now. Great. Also, when you were saying that thrill, fill, and spill, I had like a flashback to like so many years ago with the planter boxes. I was like, oh.
Well, and you know what, those, they all stand the test of time, don't they? I mean, so
Yeah,
many
they're
people know.
gorgeous.
And for people that are new to gardening, here's another gardening adage. If you're bummed about the way your garden is looking, remember the first year they sleep, the second year the plants creep, and the third year they leap. I'm full of that stuff.
I know. I love it. I love it. It takes me like a decade back.
Yeah.
Like dark hair, everything was
Yeah.
it was different. It was an exciting world of learning these little reminders is great. I think we are good to go. Just people saying thanks and stuff.
Okay.
And Jackie, thank you so much. It's so great to have you back and see your face. Hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Gosh, I hope so. It's been wonderful. Thank you. And I hope that you bungalow owners will reach out, and glad to work with anybody affiliated with the Bungalow Association.
Oh, well, it is our pleasure. And we'll be sending an email out with follow-up materials. And then, yeah, just please email Jackie directly if she said, give her a holler. Thanks everybody for coming tonight and hanging out on the first day of fall with us. And I hope you all have a lovely rest of the month.
Thanks so much. Bye now.
Have a great night.